Well, Treasurer Ball, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Congratulations on your office
Thank
and
you.
congratulations on your recent engagement.
Yes,
You've had
thank
a
you.
pretty big year, a pretty big few months.
It has. It's been a great year. God's blessed it, and so it's a very exciting time right now.
Yeah, and this is your first office.
That's right.
And to have a statewide office, and I always say that the constitutional officers that are now in positions, they really are representing Generation X, and you might even be millennial.
I am. I'm right at the edge of millennial.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
And so being a youngster, you're one of the youngest constitutional officers in the nation.
That's right.
How does that sit with you, and the responsibility or weight of that? How does that?
That's a great question, and I'll just throw in there. I'm the youngest female statewide office holder in the country, so the youngest one for. Yeah. So that's kind of a neat thing. I'm the third youngest overall, but you're right. It actually does give kind of an interesting perspective. There's several of us who are young right now, and I feel like we're energetic, we're ready to go, and we want to make a difference. And I think that reflects my generation right now. It's people that really do want to make a difference. So, it's a good time to be energetic and youthful and want to get some things done.
Well, and as you very well know, there have been many years prior where people who even ran for the office of state treasurer were calling for the abolishment of the office. Now that you're in it, and you didn't run on that platform, but you see the validity of the office and the worth of the office, and not just being check writers, but having some really critical functions to state government.
Right. Well, and I think one of the reasons why people were frustrated with it in the past is because it's been, as I described it in the campaign trail, sort of a rubber stamp position, just writing checks, computerized. And certainly there is an aspect to writing checks. That's your primary responsibility. But there is a constitutional obligation that comes with this office, and that is to make sure that what is going out is constitutional, is statutory. It really is supposed to be a watchdog position. And as a bankruptcy attorney, I think about those kinds of things very seriously. So we are really watching things, making sure that they are statutory and constitutional. And we've had some issues come up where we've done some legal research on some things, and we're continuing to do some legal research on some things, and trying to decide what is the appropriate thing for me to do with my responsibility as the watchdog.
And many people would say, Madam Treasurer, that, well, if it's legal, if it's statutory, if it's constitutional, then why is it that when it gets to you, you're finding a flaw in it not being any of those things?
Well, again, it's a check and balance. So you want to have a check and balance. Not everybody will do everything right, and that's why our founders and our even state founders set up something so that you could have other eyes looking at it. So you do have sort of shared responsibility, and that's, of course, the genius of separation of powers.
What do you envision? Do you already have an idea? I know you are working on things. You've mentioned and hinted about some legal research regarding some matters. I don't know how much you can disclose of that, but what are some of the things, if you can share generally, that you're looking into to make sure they do pass constitutional and statutory muster?
Sure. Well, I mean, again, it goes back to legal research. As an attorney, I do make sure, is this right? Is this something we're supposed to do? And if the instance would occur that actually I do need to step in, I probably would do it legally. That's my background. That's the way I think. That's probably the most appropriate way to do it. But going back a little bit to what you were saying about the function of the office, somebody told me right before I got sworn in about how people don't realize the critical nature of the office of treasurer. It's one of the few areas of government where if there was an earthquake at the Treasury and everything shut down, you would notice it right away. And I found that as I've been doing this. I'm actually the point person for the IRS, for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And the IRS isn't always very forgiving or flexible when it comes to things having to be done right and on time. And so we look at potentials of millions of dollars of fines all the time. We have to make sure things are done right and done well. And I really came to understand the importance of that, the reality of that during the snowstorm that we had a few weeks ago.
People still expected their paychecks,
well,
right?
they did. And so, the government was shut down, and rightly so, because there was,
General Assembly out of town.
Everybody was gone. There were over a foot of snow. I mean, it was a massive snowstorm. But that particular day, we had to actually get deposits out for 50,000, a little over 50,000 retired teachers, and they had to be done. If they're not done, there's severe consequences to it. So I had about half a dozen of my staff come in, even in the snow, to make sure it was done.
You all were necessary government personnel.
We did it actually on our own. I don't think we were excluded technically. We did it on our own because we understand that's part of that being that watchdog.
Right.
I understand, my staff understands that we have to make sure things are done right and they're done on time, because there's a heavy responsibility, especially when it comes to a checkbook, when it comes to money. So we try and take that watchdog position very seriously.
Yes.
An interesting aspect of that, too, we had a situation just recently, and I always describe this as being a watchdog. And my staff, I think, appreciates that, and they're trying to be responsible in that area, too. And we had an issue come up, was a $112 million wire transfer. And it was weird. And so we caught it. We thought it actually might have been fraudulent. So we ended up doing some background checks on it. And the entity that requested the wire transfer, they said, oh, yes, this is accurate, this is good, because we got an email saying it's okay. And, I mean, emails are the easiest way to commit fraud.
Sure.
So we double-checked it, made sure it was right. And it turns out that it was right. But you have to actually be keeping an eye on that. It could have been a $112 million wire transfer fraud that, you know, there were red flags and we caught it.
Yeah. One of the issues that's come up recently during this session was about Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
And there is a bill that would create a 3-tiered system that would lessen or eliminate the funding from Planned Parenthood. We know that the governor has taken actions, that presumably the Louisville operation has been performing abortions illegally, and that they do receive money, we'll just call it federal dollars, right, that come to the state. Is that the kind of situation where the state treasurer would step in to say, okay, I'm responsible for writing the check to a Planned Parenthood that is supposed to be in the business of providing women health services, but not in the business, as we understand it, to be providing abortions. Therefore, I'm withholding the allocation of funds.
Right, and when it comes to those particular instances, it's very complicated with MCOs and the way that works. And so
Managed care organizations.
Exactly, so it's a little difficult actually to target what aspect of an entity is okay and what one isn't, because it's a complicated system about how they do that, and we can spend a while talking about it, but you probably don't want me to. But and it also goes back to, you know, what's your job as an executive as opposed to a legislature, and so the General Assembly, they're the ones that get to make that call about what to do on everything in that area, and then my job is to do whatever it is the General Assembly tells me to do. But so that's my job, making sure I'm doing whatever it is the General Assembly says.
Right. But I guess when you were talking about if you found something that didn't quite pass that constitutional or statutory muster, then it goes back to then how did it get past the General Assembly to get to you, I guess, at that point, if there's an issue that would fall in the General Assembly's purview.
Sure. Now, if it comes from the General Assembly, then it probably is statutory. I mean, that's
right.
It's a statute.
Yeah,
it's come to me, and they're the ones that get to make that decision. I'm an executive. I make sure those laws are enacted.
Right.
So as far as that balance goes, that's my job in connection to them. You know, you could have instances where it's an executive order that may not be constitutional, statutory. There's some other instances too where something like that could come up.
And that would make one maybe think about the expansion of Medicaid as an executive order that was done by the previous Democratic administration, Governor Steve Beshear. Is that the kind of thing that would raise your ire?
Yes, that would be a good instance, yes. That's the kind of thing that you want to be looking out for. Is that something that's actually authorized, appropriate by our legal structure that we have set up for Kentucky?
Yeah, maybe there's more to that to come, perhaps.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see about that. Let's talk about two big critical issues that you have really come out in for. You know, and you're not in a policy-making role.
Right.
You've said
executive.
that, right?
That's
You're
right.
an executive, right?
Yeah.
So, but you are following policy, and
Yes.
I'm sure there are certain things that you've had your eye on that you think these are good policy decisions that as a citizen of Kentucky, as a taxpayer of Kentucky, I can also stand behind. There's been a lot of discussion rather about this budget, and in particular the pension crisis, the public pension systems, the teachers and the employees. There are two bills that you've got your eye on that you've said that you support, and that's SB2, which is transparency measure by the state government committee chair in the Senate, Joe Bowen. Then there's another measure, Senate Bill 45 by Chris McDaniel, who's the budget chair for A&R, that would also put, it's a transparency issue, that would put the value of former and current state lawmakers' pensions online. Transparency is the key, the common thread in both of those.
Yes.
Why do you think that's so crucial?
Well, I campaigned the whole time about the importance of transparency. I really do believe that that is an effective way to hold the government accountable. And I think that is an appropriate push from my office because, you know, who else but the state treasurer is in a better position to know what money is coming in and what money is going out. And, you know, being in charge of that checkbook, being in charge of those deposits, I feel very, very responsible in making sure that people are aware where our money is going. So it's something I care about very deeply. And I think that most Kentuckians actually feel strongly about that too. We want to know where our money is going, especially when money is tight like it is right now. So we want to know, is money going to the best place? Is it going to the right place? So I do support those two bills that you mentioned in particular because those are the two biggest transparency pushes right now. And I'm excited that that's happening. I want to see more of that. I want to encourage that. I've talked often about what Ohio has done on transparency. They have an excellent website on it. They're actually ranked #1, I think, right now on their transparency level. They're sort of the gold standard on transparency. Indiana, I think, is ranked #2. on their transparency. We are not ranked so high, and I think even Illinois, which is kind of known as a hotbed of corruption, is ranked higher than us. I feel like maybe it's even New Jersey that is also ranked higher than us. I mean, those are two states that are not known as benchmarks by any means. So we could do a better job on transparency. I would love to do something like they've done in Ohio, where it's all easily accessible to everyone. It makes sense. It's sort of like Google. I know it's been described, if you look at the Ohio website, you could even pull up, has any government person spent money at a Ritz-Carlton? You could actually check it to that level.
Wow.
So it would be great if we had that kind of accessibility here in Kentucky.
And the cost of having the kind of infrastructure in place that would allow you to Google to see who spent money at the Ritz-Carlton, seems like that'd be a pretty hefty price tag.
Well, and that's the thing. It was very expensive in Ohio, and we've actually been talking with Ohio, among other people, about, can we learn from what they've done and do it any kind of a cheaper way? And of course, money is not prevalent right now.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out what is the best way to do that. That would be a great goal, to have something at that level. And it may take us a while to reach that level. But in the meantime, we can be supporting bills like this that are increasing transparency.
And it is, at the time we recorded this interview, it's day 36.
Yes.
And so time's a ticking, right?
That's right.
And but in looking at those two bills on transparency, you are not, or are you advocating for a systems overhaul, a structural redo of those public pension systems? Because aside from the fact that we want more transparency, we also need more money in them.
Right. Well, that's true. So I think if I understand your question correctly, you're asking the entities that are being forced to be more transparent through this.
Right.
Are you asking for a structural change within those entities?
That's right, for the public, for the teachers and for the employees in retirement systems.
Well, I sit on the Kentucky Teachers Retirement Board, and so that's the one that I have the most direct influence on. And I think that we do need to do some structural changes. It's a separate issue from transparency, but I do think we need to do some structural changes, particularly for new hires. I think everybody recognizes if it's not working where you're at right now and you don't have the money right now, well, you have to do some things differently. So I am supportive of measures to change that, particularly with teachers, because that's the one that I'm on, but the other ones as well. I think we do need to be looking at that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the budget.
Sure.
You have come out in full-throated support of Governor Bevin's budget, but I would think that would also possibly adversely affect your own office. So I want to get your thoughts about the 4.5% cuts that could affect, and actually you can do that by executive order, and it could be a reality before the end of this year, and then 9% over the biennium. Do you think that's a reasonable approach, and how would your office handle any cuts? Since you do mention you've got a lot on your plate, thinking to streamlining any more, how functional could your office really be?
Yes, well, I do think, and as I've said this to several people, you've got to be the grown-ups in the room sometimes. And the reality is we don't have a lot of money right now, so you have to figure out how best can you use the money you've got. And right now it does mean we need to do some cuts. We just have to. And nobody likes that. Nobody really wants to do things like that initially, but you have to, because the money's just not there. And so my office, we've tried to follow along what the governor has his culture that he's trying to create about being mindful and fiscally responsible. So, I don't have a government car. We don't use any government cars in my office. We don't use cell phones. There's a lot of aspects that most of the agencies have in state government that we've cut out because we're trying to be fiscally responsible. We're trying to do this right. And we're having to be strategic about how to do it. We're trying to figure out ways to have people do multiple jobs. And so we're just like everybody else. We understand the reality of there's not a lot of money. How best can we make this happen? And of course, in my office, there's such essential components that have to be done. We're committed to making sure that's done no matter what.
Right. Yeah. You also sit on the Kentucky Lottery Board.
I do, yes.
And there's been, from the students in particular, there's been some resounding noise about, let's make sure that money, it's called the Powerball Promise, right? That the money from the lottery goes towards education, and not just education, because that's supposed to be statutory,
right?
That it goes toward these need-based scholarships. That the need-based scholarships have been robbed probably $60 million a biennium over the course of a few bienniums to go to other causes. And so now students are saying, we have a trifecta of things that's happening. Budget cuts to the state-supported colleges and universities, rising tuition, and now we can't get the financial aid we need. As someone who sits on the lottery board, how much are you concerned about that, and what influence do you have in steering the direction of this conversation?
Right, well, I have a commitment to, if something says something in a statute, you make sure that is done. And I think we've actually had a lot of years where people have not always done what a statute says, and that's not good. So I have a commitment to making sure that the money that that well, we created the lottery with a specific purpose in mind. That purpose has got to be accomplished, and that is funding scholarships, going to education. You know, I was at the University of Kentucky Law School on scholarship. I understand the value of those scholarship dollars and how important that is for the future of Kentucky. So I really do have a commitment in making sure that money is going to that purpose. That's what it was supposed to do, and that's what it needs to do. I think the people at the lottery, I think they appreciate that as well. And I know the governor has come out pretty strongly saying that the money needs to go where it's supposed to go. So that's an area that I feel like we can make a direct impact right away, and that needs to be done.
Yeah. Anything else you care to add that you're working on your longer range goals? I know we've really centered our conversation on these 60 days of the session because they are so pervasive in everyone's mind. But I'm sure aside from this time, once April 15th comes and goes, you've got an agenda that you'd probably like to communicate.
Well, I do. And actually, you know, one of the things I want to continue to talk about is transparency. That is something I care very deeply about, and I want to increase that during my whole time in office and get better and better and better at that. And then we do have some other things that we're working on. You know, we do have an interest in, I'm a bankruptcy attorney by trade. I care very much about individual people's financial health. And I think there's a role for the Treasurer's Office in a smart way to help people being financially literate. And I want to be fiscally responsible in how we do this. I don't want to spend state dollars on it. I would like to do a connection with the private sector to be able to do that in the most effective way, but that's something we're going to be working on as well.
I'm just thinking, what would that look like? Mobile vans? Do you have a preliminary idea of what that would look like?
We've been looking at and talking to other state treasurers across the country about ways that they're doing it, and there's a wide variety of ways to do it. And sometimes they focus on kids, sometimes they focus on single mothers.
Right.
Or
senior population.
Senior population, yes. And you know, when I was a bankruptcy lawyer, I actually had my clients twice go through financial literacy classes. I did one right before we filed for them and then right before their case was over. So, you know, figuring out what the problem was and then making sure those problems are fixed before it's all done. So this is something that I do care about. It's something I get. And so we're going to see what's the best way to do this, but we're working on it. And
do you see yourself ever advocating for some change in the public school system about making financial literacy a component of the curriculum?
I think that would be great if schools were doing more of that. And I understand they've got their own issues that they're dealing with, but yeah, it would be great if we had schools doing more of that.
Yeah. Good. Anything else?
Well, I think that's pretty good, and I appreciate you mentioning that I just got engaged. So yes, that's another exciting aspect of my life right now.
Do you care to divulge if you set a date?
We have not set a date. We have a general time frame, but but it's hard to
busy,
work on that.
So
it's kind of busy.
I hope you can, you know, etch in some time.
That's right. My fiance is chief of staff for the transportation cabinet, so both of us right now are very very busy during session, and so we're not going to be able to do very much for the next 2 months or so, but.
Right. Yeah.
But it's exciting. It's a good time.
And congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I hope you do enjoy that. Take some time to enjoy it.
I will try to.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.